was such a speedy response. Thank you. And should we give people another minute, or everyone ready to get started? All right. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this cold and rainy evening. My name is Cynthia Kawasaki. I'm the Chief of Communications and Management Support at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. For awareness, we are live streaming this meeting on the Parks Facebook page, and the recording will be available on Facebook and on YouTube after. So we're here to provide an update on what things are looking like in the parks after the last few storms, most notably the last couple storms. There's a lot we still don't know, but our crews have taken advantage of the breaks in weather to access and evaluate as much as they can. We know how much park closures impact our local communities, businesses, economies, tourism, and so forth. So we thought we'd share everything we know at this time, go over what we don't know, and share some next steps and ways you can stay informed as we move forward. I know it's only January, but we know spring break and summer planning is already in the works for many, so this is just the beginning in our efforts to provide everyone with as much information as we can. Today, you'll get an overview of the damage and an update on current conditions. Whoop. Sneak peek. So today you'll get an overview of the damage and an update on current conditions by our park superintendent, Clay Jordan. And he'll be followed by our Chief of Facilities, Maintenance and Construction, Rick Hall, to give the storm damage impact. Also here today from Sequoia and Kings Canyon, we have our Chief Ranger, Ned Kelleher, our Chief of Interpretation, Education and Partnerships, Mark Neidick, our Chief of Resources Management and Science, Christy Brigham, and our Public Affairs Specialist, Rebecca Patterson. After Q&A, but before we close out for the evening, we do want to hear from our local stakeholders about preferences for staying informed. So please stick around for that if that's something of interest. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and get us started. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Clay Jordan.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. All right, Rebecca, keep me in line if I wander too far here.
We'll follow you.
Hey, good evening. Boy, it seems like we've met under all kinds of challenging situations in this room in the 2 years that I've been here, and I really appreciate folks coming out and to get the best information that we can provide. And as Cynthia explained, this is very much an unfolding situation, and things have not even stabilized some of the damage that had been occurring over the last couple of weeks in particular. And of course, fortunately we have a real break in the weather right now through to the end of the month after this little spout works its way through, and we really want to take advantage of that. And we want to kind of there's limited information that we can tell you about the future, but we want to begin the dialogue. We want you to have the best possible information as we learn it, and establish that forum to be able to give that exchange of information, because we so much recognize the impacts and the connection between the park and the communities and the businesses and people who plan their vacations from all around the world to spend this time with us now. And it's not so simple to be able to say, hey, I guess I just won't come this week or whatever. So we take enormous pride in that, and it personally, it kills me to not be fully open for business, but that's also our reality, and we want to share with you some of that best case information. I guess if there's a good news to start off with, right, is that we have put a real dent in the drought conditions over the last 6 weeks. I think we've got like 27 inches of liquid precipitation up at Giant Forest in the last 2 weeks. And of course, December was pretty impressive too. I will tell you from the big picture, and Rick will kind of go into some of the details. It is a mess up in the park. I mean, the snow. We got, of course, last week we had the two major events at the beginning of the week, and then the doubleheader last weekend. And we got 5 feet of snow on that doubleheader event last weekend, which was on top of several feet of snow. So up above the snow line, we got heavy snow that our crews are working. And I think it's kind of a threefold punch that is really creating the challenge for us. First of all, we had a lot of thick snow that accumulated in December up at the upper elevations. And then that storm that we had, 10 days ago or whatnot, of course that snow line was really high up. And so not only did we get a lot of inches of rain out of that, but we got a lot of inches of rain on top of this snowpack. And that just created flooding that then started taking out culverts and that sort of thing. And then the third piece of it, of course, is the fire burn slopes. That is a new factor as compared to some of the previous flood events in the past. And when you're in the roads business, about the most important thing you can do is keep those culverts clean. And I'll say that our crews have made Herculean efforts throughout the season since the K&B complex, in advance of the storm, during the storm, break in the storm, between the storms, to try to keep those drainage things going, because that's where we're really vulnerable, and we're going to talk about that. That's as far as the general's highways, and that is also the situation with the Mineral King Road that we're real concerned with. There is a lot that we have not been able to get to yet. Mineral King is, we've seen the lower section of the road, and we can report on that. We have not seen the upper sections of the roads and how it's made out. Same thing in Cedar Grove. There's a big rock on 180, which is about a good part of this room that will take a lot of dynamite to clear it. And so we can't get into Cedar Grove. We're getting a helicopter here on Saturday, and we're going to fly to some of these areas, and then we'll have more information next week about some of that. But we're going to share what we know and the balls that are in motion already to help us recover as quickly as possible, and what that is starting to shape up to look like. I do want to really acknowledge that the crews in the park, short-staffed, and our heavy equipment operators, mechanics, they're harder to come by, in today's society, especially when you ask them to work in remote areas with expensive housing and cost of living. Our folks, though, have been tireless, and they've been pushed really hard. Our equipment has been pushed really hard over the last 6 weeks, and we have a lot of big equipment, but it's constantly, especially if you get the rocks underneath the snow and you hit a rock or something. So there are a lot of challenges that Rick will help us appreciate. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick, and we'll take it from there.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Clay.
Oh, I was going to talk about this, right?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to do this pretty quickly. This is just to state the status of what is open and right now throughout the park. So I just want to be clear about that. We do have on the Sequoia side, the road is open to Hospital Rock. The Potwisha Campground is open. The road is closed then to Giant Forest. We have established administrative access so that we can work on that road and provide those residents a lodgepole access in and out. The South Fork, let me talk about Mineral King Road. Mineral King Road is very much closed, and we're asking that no residents go beyond the gate because there are a couple of washouts. We're very concerned that you put a large vehicle too close to that edge. Not only is there a safety concern, we could lose, the entire section of the road. So we're really asking for everyone's cooperation and working with us there. And that's part of the reason why we want to fly on Saturday, is so that we can kind of at least provide some information back to cabin owners and whatnot up at Mineral King to give you some idea of what's going on there. And then South Fork Campground, not a big deal this time of year, right? But that area got hit real hard. So that area is closed. We have not been able to access North Fork Trailhead because of the county section of the road has not been passable for us to get up there yet. On the Kings Canyon side, Grant Grove, everything is open. That's normally open this time of year. It's less of a challenge to keep that open, and so fortunately we are able to send people to Big Trees and all that stuff over at Grant Grove. Cedar Grove is normally closed this time of year, of course, and we don't have access or a report from that, as I stated. Campground at Cedar Grove, at Grant Grove is open and whatnot. And the General's Highway is normally closed in the winter time when there's snow, and so we've not been able to assess some of that, but Rick will go into those details. All right, thank you.
So we'll start with South Fork here. As you can see from some of the pictures that staff have collected, the damage is pretty extensive. The road is currently impassable to vehicle traffic. The campground got some pretty devastating flooding, so that this area has been extensively damaged. It's going to require quite a bit of work to get that area of the park reopened in the way that it was before. So that's going to be something that we are evaluating as we go forward. Sliding up, you heard Clay mention some undercutting and whatnot. Crews on a couple of different trips were able to get about halfway between Lookout Point and Atwell. And you can see there the gentleman's standing a little closer than I would like to the undercut on the pavement there, but that's what Clay was alluding to, and one of the reasons why we're concerned about vehicular traffic there. There are about 11 other locations on the road that have been identified where there is some minor erosion on the embankment that's not necessarily impinging on the asphalt at that time, but this one here was clearly underneath. There's another location that's also underpinning the inbound lane to some extent. So we're facing some pretty significant damage there. And then as the other pictures indicate, there's the very typical debris after winter storms. We're getting some large rock coming down as well as some debris. As I indicated on Mineral King, we've only been out foot, bicycle, and vehicle out to about halfway up to Atwell. We have not seen the rest of it. That's, as Clay indicated, that's a big part of the reason for the helicopter ride, is to try and get eyes on the rest of the road so we understand the magnitude of what's going on out there. North Fork, we haven't been able to assess at all yet. The Marble Falls Trail, you can again see some pictures here. Lower elevation of the foothills, you'll see some of the damage that the trail incurred. This trail is currently closed. Large rockfall creating some hazardous hiking conditions to get around. But this is somewhat typical of what we're finding in the lower elevations as far as trail damage and roadway damage. Shepherd Saddle Road across the top, you'll see here it's currently also not passable. It's going to require equipment to blade that back off. But you can see here, very typical that we're experiencing the lower elevations below snow line. A lot of rock, a lot of mud, a lot of debris coming down across the roads. General's Highway, I'm going to start with the area from the entrance up to Hospital Rock. That area has been closed off and on periodically over the last week or so. The reason for that is we are getting a lot of rock fall down there along with some mud. It's creating situations where we lose a lane until we can get that plowed and cleared out of the way. It's also creating situations where we have a lot of standing water in the road. And so while we work on that, we make a determination at various times that we just don't want to leave the road open to the public while we, clear those hazards out of the way. But that is what's going on at the lower elevations. Again, we're seeing a lot of that material coming down. Leaving Hospital Rock, going up the hill, we get to a location that is below Big Fern Spring there, between there and Hospital Rock. For those of you that are familiar with the area, One Shot Rock might ring a bell for some of you. We had the pictures here in the center where we had a down drain flume disconnect from the road. The volume of water was just so great it broke it. It is now back undercut the road. The undercutting extends to the fog line there. In this particular location, as you can see from the cones, this was an early picture. We've closed the downhill lane of traffic. We've also put in a dirt berm reinforced by 2 rows of sandbags in that location to keep water away from that failing area, to try and preserve it while we work with outside agencies to get us some help to do a more emergency temporary solution until we can enact a permanent repair. This also challenges us because operationally I'm very reluctant to allow super heavy vehicles like water tenders, fuel gas trucks, that type of thing to go up the road on this side. It's currently fine for passenger vehicles, normal work trucks, even our heavy equipment, but when we start getting into propane tanks and trucks and whatnot, so it's posing a challenge for us. We don't have this way up the hill right now. Moving a little further up the hill, the picture on the upper left is 11 range. Apologize for all the snow on the ground up there. Makes it hard to see the damage, but we had in that first storm that Clay was alluding to, where it was a lot of rain at that elevation, there was a tremendous amount of sheet flow across that edge, and it just started cutting big rills down that side right there. In this particular location, it also was compounded by the fact that this is an outfall from a culvert, and the volume of water was so great it just blew out the rock protection at the downstream side. In this particular location, the erosion has only come back to the edge of the pavement there, which is a chain up area. So it's not impacting the road at all right now, but it is impacting that area as a chain up area. So we're monitoring this and trying to get it more stabilized as quickly as possible, but it's less critical right now than the first condition. We come up here to the picture in the upper right, and this is up just below the Fort Guardsman as you get into Giant Forest. We have a large culvert there. It's about 25 feet below the roadway. We have a tree in that culvert right now. Don't know the extent of it because it's down in the bottom of a 25-foot lake. We are trying to get the water pumped out so that we can get down to the tree and evaluate how we're going to get that tree out of the culvert to restore flows here. We cut an emergency bypass around this. On the outside edge there, the water's actively undermining the road in this location. So not surprising, but it's taking the base out. The road failed Saturday morning when we were up there to a foot of about a foot deep. So we are in the process of taking up rock, filling in it, leveling it back out. In this location right now, we've also closed that uphill lane. At that location, we're forcing traffic to the other side, which is in better shape. This section of road here will need to be rebuilt from scratch. We'll have to take it all the way back down to dirt to get the competent material to rebuild it all back up. So this is going to be a fairly significant undertaking. The picture on the bottom left is just the debris that came down from the one-shot rock failure. So that gives you an idea about what's washing down onto the road. We have about a dozen locations where we have active rockfall that's taken out one lane of the road going up the hill from Hospital Rock up to the Giant Forest right now. Many of those we're just leaving because by leaving it in place, we're still able to maintain our access in the other lane, and it's holding back the other material because as soon as we take it down, we're going to have more fall. So it's just going to create some workforce. Crystal Cave, I am very worried about the Crystal Cave Road. We have a bridge down there. We have not put eyes on that bridge now in some time because of all of this storm activity. In addition, we have culverts and a road that probably wasn't in the greatest of condition already as you go down the hill. So this is an area of concern. I'm hoping to get some eyes on this from the helicopter, but we have not been able to get down there and look at this at all. Just to give you some idea about the depth of the snow the lodgepole's seeing here, it's basically up to the eaves. This is more traditional that some of you guys are going to be used to seeing that have been here for a number of years. This is, I think right now, rough numbers, 150% of normal for April 1st is what the snowpack is. It's just under 300% in the southern Sierra right now. So it's a lot of snow. And of course that poses a lot of challenges for the residents. There's a lot of digging out. Just digging a car out right now is a couple hours, just to dig out a single car. From Red Fir, for those of you that know, we do try and maintain a lane going across the top. That's how we, make sure we have emergency access. It's also how we deliver fuel, and it's how we deliver propane to the community back there. We have not been on the road from Woodward Gate, which is, Montecito area, all the way to Red Fir in a while. That's because we've had our hands full in the other portions of the park that we're trying to keep open. We have made a little bit of progress about 3 miles south of Woodward Gate, but that's about all. I'm hoping with the break in weather that we're going to be able to get back into that. For those of you that are aware, we were finding 5.5 feet at Big Baldy on the road. And because of the volume, I am told that and expect that Little Baldy, that the avalanche zone will have slid and we could see 20 to 30 foot drifts on the road at that point. So it's gonna be a lot of work getting across the top. So Woodward into Grant, here you see one of the large rotary machines. You get a sense of how high the snow is there. It's cutting it in. The challenge when the snow gets this deep is we're limited on the equipment that we can use. In a situation like this, we can't, plow blades are less effective. There's nowhere to push the snow. There's banks. So we need to use a rotary to throw it up and out of the way. So that's what's going on there. We did feel pretty good. Montecito was cut off and did not have road access for about 3 weeks, which is a little longer than normal during the winter. And so we were able to get them back to where they have vehicular access and they could get in and out. And so we're now into trying to maintain that mode. Grant Grove itself, again, not as much snow as Lodgepole, but still significant. And the picture there in the center middle, you can see we did have a compromised structure that is now a pancake. It is flat on the ground and ready to be, the parts removed.
It used to be a ranger station.
It did. It did. So Highway 180, one of the things that, as Clay indicated, it is an evolving thing. You can see here the Caltrans worker, you can see the boulder. This is in the area of the big slide that we had last year. This may be one of the perched rocks that was remaining that has now come down. You can see that, and then you can see, on the left that there's, quite a bit more. The good news that we're hearing on 180 from Caltrans is that most of it appears to be rock and not a lot of mud. So hopeful that that's going to be a little bit easier to clean up and that it won't have created some of the washout kind of damage that we're seeing on the Generals and on Mineral King. We have not put eyes yet though from down in, from that last slide area further out into, Cedar itself. And so that's again one of the things we're hoping to get out and see in the helicopter, because as that area, as some of you know, it's pretty low and it's closer to the river. So we may find bridge damage or campground infrastructure damage as we get out there. That's Cedar. So that's really kind of the damage that we know of right now and where we're at. We're really, to reiterate what Clay was saying, we're really in a assess, evaluate, and stabilize mode right now. We're not shifting in a lot of ways, to do much more than that. We're just trying to get our arms around the damage we have and keep it from getting worse so that we, don't lose entire sections of road and whatnot. So, Clay?
Yeah, don't go away. I'm just going to kind of expand that a little bit as to, what those next steps and how we're going about it. As Rick explained, right now we're trying to stabilize. We're trying to prevent that damage from getting any worse, whether it's on the Mineral King Road, whether it's on the General's highways. You know, the Four Guardsmen where Rick was talking about, that whole road is compromised. But the good news is that the situation there is kind of a sinkhole. So from a repair perspective, it's a major job. The whole road will have to be repaired there, but it's a matter of filling it in, and it's not as big a deal. We lose the road down by One Shot Rock or 11 Range, where it's hanging on the side of the mountain, or those points that Rick was pointing out on Mineral King Road. Now we're into a whole nother tier of repair and time, and of course being totally cut off. And so we're really fighting, to try to do that. And part of that stabilization, we can't stabilize what we don't know is not stable. And so hence the flying and trying to get scout out things in Mineral King and Cedar Grove and these other locations to try to keep the damage from not getting any worse. And then it's about trying to get our way through the rest of the winter, through February, March, and then into the spring rainy season, and trying to shore up those roads as best we can so that we're not losing it for a long period of time. So it's very much in that stabilize and assess. Fortunately, we do have, being a federal agency, we do have some assets available to us. The Federal Highway Administration has emergency road funds, and we already have the wheels in motion to tap into those funds and to work with their engineers on these temporary solutions followed by more permanent solutions. As we do that, obviously we're going to be, we're very focused on how do we get public access back to Giant Forest Lodgepole as quick as possible. And so, and we're already putting wheels in motion as we explore those options, like the possibility of a one-lane traffic with a traffic control system. If the uphill lane is sound and remains sound. So we're trying to work on those things, to assess those things. Of course, coming in over the top, whereas we would normally be trying to fight the snow, it's such a challenging environment to maintain access coming in from Grant Grove to Lodgepole. We're trying to go there and to assess that. There may be a large avalanche zone that may have released by Big Little Baldy, and so we haven't been able to see that yet. So, but we're pursuing that at the same time to try to see what we can do to establish routes into that area, since it's so important to everybody. So I think we're going to know more, in a few days from now, in a week or two from now. I'm hoping that we can while we're putting these other repairs and working on these other issues, I'm hoping, but cannot guarantee, that we can establish some kind of at least limited access through these other routes. Of course, there's only two ways to get there, we know, and this is the coming up from Three Rivers. Of course, is the main access, especially in the winter time, and is certainly the preferred route. So those are the things we're working on, and we do want to engage in a dialogue so that you can have the best information available, and then and because of that, we recognize that it's all that much more important to try to maintain that access to Grant Grove. That's a long ways from Three Rivers, but we our folks are doing a great job of keeping that open while we work on these other issues. You know, this is kind of a historic situation, and of course, as you know, I'm kind of the new guy here. But I have people, they start comparing things. Well, you know, in 1997, that was pretty bad. I think this is worse. And you talk to somebody in another part of the park, they say, well, 97 was worse than this, and you know, so you have different conditions in different parts of the park. Other people, I'm hearing 1989, you know, oh my gosh, well, in 1989, and then I've been hearing stories about, well, back in the 1960s, we had a couple real bad ones, you know. Well, that kind of puts it in perspective that we really are dealing with something that is not a common event, and I really credit, you know, Rick was talking about the one-shot rock and the double sandbagging and all that. That was in place for the second round of the doubleheader last weekend, and I really credit the roads crews. There was an all hands on deck. You know, we had firefighters helping with the sandbagging along the roads. We had folks from headquarters on the roof. Christy and I were shoveling snow, trying to keep residences from not collapsing up there, because I don't have the skills to do a whole lot else, but I do know how to work a shovel. And so it's been an all hands on deck to try to do that. We've already been working on access to the General Sherman tree to try to prevent it from icing up, so that as soon as we can get access up that road, we've got the other pieces falling in place. So a lot of balls in the air, a lot of juggling and trying to address a lot of challenges at once. But I think it is going to require some patience on all of our parts. Do we want to go to Q&As now? And if you want to...
Oh, there's your new slide that I need.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so I think we're ready for Q&A. Questions, concerns, comments. We do ask that if you do have something to ask us, please speak up, because we are on Facebook Live, and so we're trying to project so that they can also hear us there. But we'll also try to repeat the questions as we get them. Any questions? Yeah.
Timeline. A hopeful one, a realistic one. I can assume that not much can happen until the snow has melted, as far as assessment and whatnot. Bidding out job work. As a local business owner and a member of the Chamber of Commerce for the community, obviously this has a deep impact on fiscal opportunities for those that live and earn money here. So what can we expect?
Well, and Rick can kind of help me when I get this wrong. But first of all, we're not waiting for the snow to melt.
Okay.
If we wait for the snow to melt, we're
too late.
closed for many, many months.
All right.
And it is full pace. As like I said, we know we got 10 days of good weather that hopefully things aren't going to get worse. And we're hoping the temperatures stay cold, because that's the other piece of it, right? If temperatures warm up and that snow starts melting, then we have this sheet flow going across the roads, and we're clogging up the culverts, and all his folks are spending time, instead of moving towards reopening something, his folks are all working on trying to keep culverts clear and with the equipment and all that, to try to not lose something. Because if we lose something like one-shot rock or 11-mile range, we could then be shut down for a really long time. And so we really are working, and the next steps are those emergency contracts with the Federal Highway Administration, and that ball is in motion to help us bring in some fixtures, including one-lane options, and to help us stabilize those locations and then start working on the permanent fix. But I'm hoping that, and this is the hope, is that we restore some level of public access to Giant Forest while we're doing a lot of that work. But there's some unknowns here. And he'd be kicking me in the shin if I'd say, oh yeah, in 2 weeks we're going to have that lane, because we'll have the traffic lights in the one lane, because we don't really know to what extent that one lane can support traffic. And I know that there's some weather coming in January 31st. We don't know, if we have a big storm that all of a sudden undermines the road a little bit further. But I'm really hoping that in the next, and maybe in the next week or so, we have at least a better guess, and that our folks take pride in getting people up there, and so that's what we're focused on. But we're not waiting for the snow to melt, that's for sure.
So we're not, are we talking 3 months, are we talking 6 months? We have no idea.
We don't know, but
That's the bad outlook.
that would really be a worse reasonable case scenario. I'm hoping, and you'll forgive me.
He ordered the traffic lights like 5 days ago.
What are you hoping?
Right.
So that we don't control the road, but
I'm
We
hoping,
control him.
I'm hoping that we're talking in the time frame of weeks than months, but I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think just to add a couple of things, in addition to federal highways, because we are the federal service, we have, sister parks all over the country. And so today we were putting out a call basically for help, on some of these specialized trades, like if you can come and you can be spared, or you're on furlough and you want to come back and get paid a little more, we can put you to work. So that call has gone out. And then, as Christy was alluding to, we're trying to acquire the pieces, because California got hit very hard. I'm sure as we all, see the news. And so resources are going to get pretty scarce. Things like traffic lights, things like, graded
Barriers.
rock, things like road barriers, things like contractors to come fix things. It's going to get hard. And so we're trying to, even though we haven't made any decisions yet about what we're doing, some of the pieces, okay, let's get the pieces in place so that we have it as an option still, rather than, oh, we think we could do this, oh, well, we're lacking this. And so we're trying to think ahead and do some of that to set ourselves up so that when we get to a place where we've got our arms around, like we think we know how much damage we have, and so then we can start prioritizing and planning for what we're going to do and how we're going to tackle it. We have a little more in place.
Yeah, that's really real helpful to paint that, because we're dependent, first of all, on money from Federal Highway Administration, because we're up in the millions, right? And what you've seen here, I think it's safe to say is in the millions, and we could be in the tens of millions of dollars. I mean, we're talking real money to get totally going again. And so there may be some triaging in other areas, because a lot of areas have taken a hard hit. But even when we think that, okay, we think in a look through a normal lens and say, okay, well, a few days, get some stone in here to stabilize, get a contract, an emergency contract, and the contractors help us and write it, but then nobody bids, right? Because they've got work all over the place. So suddenly you have a superintendent who gave you a timeline, of a couple of weeks or whatnot, and suddenly there's nobody, no equipment available, or the rock, or the supply level, or, and so those are some of the challenges we're dealing with, is just materials and labor to get folks to come. Fortunately, we've got a partner that has some deep pockets to help us with some of that expense, but that has to spread along a long way. So that's why it is so challenging to give that guesstimate, is because there are some variables that are so far beyond our staff and all the equipment and the people that we have and all that. We are very dependent on outside resources to get that. And then we're dependent on the weather to cooperate with us. Stay cold. If it's going to do something, send us some snow. We don't need any more rain for a good while. and then to help us to get ahead on that weather. But I'm you know, I don't know, I tend to be a little bit optimistic, and sometimes that gets me in trouble. But I'm hoping we're not talking months.
But to add to that, we do plan on doing more communication, so this will not be the last time we connect with local stakeholders. And so as soon as we are getting more and more information, we will be sharing that with everyone. So we will have more information as soon as next week after the helicopter flight. And so, you know, we'll be informing everyone as we get more information, so that hopefully with that, we can start maybe developing those timelines as the weeks go on.
And with that, would that come with any type of fiscal assistance that may come with communities? I know when it comes to natural disasters and whatnot, oftentimes you may hear of opportunities that may come to the local community, because obviously, I mean, we've been hit hard when it comes to COVID and wildfires and whatnot, and this was kind of the year that we thought, well, are we gonna get away with maybe having some kind of a successful, good time? And right now, the year has started off with not feeling that way. So I encourage, if there's any type of opportunity to bridge that with the community, as a member of the chamber, like, I feel like this room could be filled, and maybe you and I can meet personally to where we can make that communication more viable for the town.
Yeah, and we'll be going into that a little bit more after Q&A.
I appreciate that.
But that's a great
Yeah.
question. What kind of opportunities can we look at for financial assistance for economically impacted?
Absolutely, because I'm looking at FEMA, and there's been 2 counties that have been declared as an opportunity. But, I mean, this town can only handle so much beat down, and granted, respectfully, I worked in the park for 20 years. I understand everything that's involved with that, but
Yeah.
we can only get beat down so much without getting a little bit of help here.
Yeah.
So if those opportunities come around, and I'm a good friend with Christy over there, that like maybe that there could be a more like a communicative opportunity for local businesses and whatnot to keep us from having to be in the hole yet another year.
Yeah, so those financial assistance programs are in other parts of the government that I have, you know, no connection, or it's out of my wheelhouse. I think pursuing those things, working through the county representatives and local governments, and on up from that, we're in a position to kind of brief out and paint the picture of that economic connection to the park and our reality, so we can support, you know, that function. But those types of community financial assistance are through very different channels than anything that we have.
And that's understood, but if we
Yeah.
can create that bridge between NPS and the
Yes.
community, just as far as knowledge is concerned, like
Yes.
if anything comes up from your end to bridge that, I understand that that's not your job,
Sure.
but that is an
Yes.
effective way to bridge a relationship with the community.
I agree, and anything we can do for that,
Understood.
we're with you.
Thank
You know,
you.
we live here. You know, this is
Absolutely.
our community,
Right.
you know, so.
Well, and I think just to add to that a little bit, you know, we had some representatives, you know, from the region our region that were out, you know, last week. And we have problems like this, unfortunately, in a number of parks right now. And many of those parks are also not in the federally declared disaster area. And so that idea came up, and so that's being communicated through our channels back with federal highways and whatnot. I don't have any idea politically how well, you know, that will encourage the governor's office to talk to the White House to get it included, but, you know, some of that reporting out and up is occurring, where we have that sort of opportunity to make sure that folks understand, you know, the damage that occurred here.
And by the way, before we get too much further, I just want to acknowledge, really appreciate, you know, our partners from CAL FIRE here, and two of our leaders from the community, and very much they're always looking for ways to partner and assist, within their authorities and their resources and all that. And representatives from the county, from the sheriff's department. And is there any message that you want to deliver or anything on
I'll just
that?
take back what I can so I can brief up.
Okay. So you're here to listen, but we appreciate that we all try to work closely together between the park and the state agencies and the county agencies. So appreciate that we're all together in this. Other questions, Glenn?
I'll change the subject a little bit. Mineral King Road,
Yes, sir.
there has been a project on the books, and I believe it's scheduled already to widen and redo the whole
Yeah.
road. When is that supposed to start?
All right, so Rick's going to help me with this. I will say, though, that the idea of that project, which is very well along in the design phase of it, it was intended because we recognize that we've been on borrowed time, and we've been very fearful of these type of weather events, and we knew that it was just a matter of time before we would lose that road if we did not come up with the resources. And mind you, I think that's like a $40 million project, so you're talking a very pricey. So it's taken a while for the Federal Highway Administration to be able to piece that together. This, I think, will generate a little bit of discussion as to what kind of repairs on this versus the larger project. Does this affect the timeline? Did they bump that up a little bit? So anyway, that's a little bit of conjecture at this
Is
point.
there
But Rick-
a planned
Actually-
start date?
Oh, I'm sorry, actually, that conversation's already started. So the damage has already been recognized. The good news is because of that design effort, there's a lot of information known about the road. So it's being incorporated into now as we identify the damage to get repairs, to see whether we incorporate that into that larger project or whether that it needs to be standalone. Some of the areas right now I'm seeing, again, I'd like to get some emergency stabilization done at a minimum and get that, when I walk out and see it, then we can make a better decision as to whether that has any opportunity to wait for the rest of the work or if that needs to be standalone ahead of it.
Is there a start date for that program?
Yes.
So there is a start date for that program. It's a multi-year project right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Clay, but I apologize, folks, I'm a little tired right now. I believe we were in the last stages of the design effort right now to go out to obligate the contract money this fiscal year.
My understanding from, I thought Ellie and Brian was the start date's 2024.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yes.
So the
Yeah.
construction start date for that project, which is pretty darn complicated, as I'm sure you're aware,
Yeah.
is anticipated to take more than one season, is
Right.
2024.
Yeah, it was a multi-year effort, starting next year.
Yeah, so as you might imagine, they're not going to want to spend a lot of money that would have such very temporary use, and they might try to see how they can couple the projects together, or something that the engineers will be working on. But once that project is done, get to that point, then that road is going to be a whole lot more resilient to these type of threats moving forward. So it kind of underscores, this weather event underscores what we recognize has been the need to move that. And so fortunately, that is well, on its way.
And one of the things we did with the fire after the KMP complex fire is that altered the design of that to incorporate some changes that were necessary following that. So what we're trying to evaluate now is once we get our arms around all the damages, do we do that again and then temporarily stabilize until 24, or do we need to do some more immediate work? And I don't know an answer to that right now until we get our eyes on all of it and see it and get it stabilized so that we're not continually having things get worse.
Yeah, especially because we don't know what's up the road, right? Just being halfway to well, there could be other locations like what we've seen. They may be less, they may be worse. John?
Well, there's the knowns, the unknowns, then there's Mineral King Road. And I've been looking into be a possibility of me getting my cabin come in the summertime? I know it's hard to kind of.
Well, we asked this after the helicopter flight, and, you know, hopefully again, kind of similar to what we've been talking about as far as the generals, if we can maintain one solid lane, we may be able to restore that access with traffic lights. But that's a pretty high priority of ours too, because we recognize and respect the private properties that are involved there. So it's not just about recreation access, obviously. It is community access, and so that weighs pretty heavily. And so I think that whatever measures we can put in place to stabilize and to try to restore, you know, one lane access or whatnot is what we're going to be trying to do. Obviously, if we find further up the road that the road's totally blown out, then it becomes a whole nother game. Yeah, life.
And a second thing, almost all the damage is in the fire zones, pretty much. Is that correct? For the most part, yeah. So we got a lot of winter to come, and if I was to pick a winter, this is 1968, 69.
Okay.
We have
I've heard
lulls
that.
between the storms. There's another atmospheric river coming in 2 weeks. So if we have a lull, a storm, a lull, a storm, it just piles up and piles up. How would you react to something like that?
With a lot of coffee, you know, and probably with a whole lot less sleep. Yeah, that's why I think it's so important that, like the sandbagging and stuff like that, the things that we can do, the first thing, highest priorities would be not to lose the road altogether. And that's going to take precedence to reopening access even. You know, so we've got to try to position ourselves as best as possible for those next atmospheric rivers, you know, if they come.
And they're already doing that. I mean, these guys are underselling how much work.
Oh, I believe it.
I mean, assess sounds like you're just taking pictures. They're up there digging.
Oh, I believe it. I've been down for like 2 weeks, so I've been sort of.
Yeah,
missed
I
the
mean,
whole thing.
there's 2 pumps going in the 25-foot deep pond at Four Guardsmen. There's equipment ordered. There's people digging out any culverts that they can get to. They're cleaning the gutters. They're putting in the sandbags. They're redirecting the water. You know, assess.
I believe
just,
they're doing a great amount
yeah.
of work. It's just, if it comes at us like, you know, it's these extremes. We go from crazy
Yeah.
drought to crazy.
I know. Pendulums like to swing to extremes, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Four Guardsmen, it's been interesting. First, we start with some portable fire pumps to try to drain things out, to get the water down, to be able to access the tree and the culvert that's causing the problem. And the whole drainage is failing into that pond. And then after that, that wasn't cutting it. So then we actually brought in our structural fire engine. We were risking, you know, our couple of $100,000 potential repairs, because to try to use that to pump water out, that wasn't cutting it. So they were able to rent a huge pump from the town, got that set up. That wasn't doing it, and they've managed to find yet a larger trailer pump that is now up there. And so we got 2 pumps up there trying to drain that, to try to reduce the amount of undermining that goes on in the road there. Because if we lose that section, even though it's not as big a deal to replace it, it just cuts off total access, administrative access included. So yeah, his staff have been doing a Herculean effort and dropping a lot of dimes and trying to pull other resources in to alleviate the situation.
We have one online question.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so first I just want to say thank you so much for all of this information and your openness about it. It's very useful. So I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
So the first one, you were talking about variables, and one of the variables is the county. So for the Mineral King Road, North Fork and South Fork is county owned, of course, before the park. And there's substantial damage on all three of those roads. That's the county's responsibility. So I'm just wondering if you have any insight into that and what kind of delays that might cause in
Yeah.
terms of repairing.
Excellent question, and so I know a piece of that. So I know the Mineral King piece, and as we were describing these washouts in the park, the county had a fairly significant one between the bridge and the park boundary that they were dealing with. And we just got an update from them this afternoon that they've pretty much already been able to shore that up. And so they feel that there is vehicle access past that point. So we were concerned that we wouldn't even be able to get to the park and to work on our sections because of the county sections. The county has responded wonderfully and very quickly, and they've addressed that. I have less information about what's going on in North Fork or South Fork. I know South Fork is accessible up, and do you happen to know the situation in North Fork up the road?
It's accessible now, but it should only be used for priority traffic.
Okay.
Because they did fix it a little bit, but it's only temporary.
So temporary fixes on the North Fork,
And South Fork.
but access to all the properties up North Fork?
That's correct.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, the county has been very responsive. The South Fork, North Fork, and Mineral King, Lower Mineral King. So we're in good shape there.
Okay. And then some of the cabin owners asked me to ask you whether the helicopter is going to look at structural damage with the cabins. The latest webcam image suggests that there were already slides, and so there's with the heavy snow, of course, there's some concern about structural damage.
Yeah. So what the mission that is federally funded is focused on the road and emergency services and all that stuff. But I think we can kind of sandwich a lot in there, and they'll be looking. And I say they, I may be up there myself at some point, but we'll be looking at the houses. It may not be a close examination, house by house, as the helicopter hovers at 20 feet over the roofs or anything. But we'll be able to maybe pick out any major, issues that we see, and then be able to report back. And taking pictures and videos, and we'll have all that available. We'll find a way, and I know Cynthia, after the Q&As, will talk about how to best do that exchange of information, because we really don't. We want to try to satisfy that information as best as possible, so that somebody doesn't feel they need to make the desperate thing to get, a big 4x4 up there and potentially get into real trouble and really block off access for months because of a road collapse. So we do want to try to provide some good information there.
Hey, a second question.
Can we do this Facebook question first,
Oh,
John,
sure.
and then we'll
Yeah.
come back to you?
We have two questions here now. One of them is a simple question, but sort of subjective perhaps. Is this kind of damage unprecedented, or has the park dealt with something like this before?
Yeah, well, there's probably some folks in the audience that have a lot more institutional knowledge. What I've been learning is that there's certain locations that have been harder hit in past storms, but there are other locations that were harder hit in this storm. But we are talking 50 years of history here in that. Just like the South Fork that just got really hit hard. I mean, it's a geologic change that took place within the park boundary up there, and really impressive. And I don't think that had happened in the 60s or 80s or 90s, So when you look through that lens, this is the worst and unprecedented. But there are other locations and other floods that there may have been other storms that were bad. But it's up there. It is certainly one of the most impactful storm systems and effects that we have seen in many, many decades.
Do you think that that's mainly due to the fire? I mean, having been working in the park for 20 years and like there's constant road construction and we're trying to improve infrastructure, is that a fire related?
I think it's partly the fire. That's a definite component in there. But as we've been learning from climate change, right, is that storm systems are becoming more intense. And so when you look at the amount of precipitation that is falling in these, and how these atmospheric rivers have lined up, those are indications of some pretty extreme weather. And Christy, is there anything you would expand on that?
No, I think that's good. I personally think based on what I'm seeing in the field that the fire played a huge role. And it makes you understand you don't have a road without vegetation. And if you burn off all the upper watershed,
It's all coming down.
it's all coming down. There's a giant log lodged in the culvert. And from what we've heard from our road supervisor who's been here a long time, you know, we've had years that were this wet where we did not get anywhere near this damage. So it's the combination of, with the atmospheric river, with rain on snow events and getting more rain on snow, but you combine that with how much mud, rock, and debris mobilized, and you don't have that vegetation stabilizing. And most of those blowouts, you take the picture, it's blackened tree trunks where the blowout is.
Yeah, one of our roads chiefs, he's been here more than 30 years, and he said, and he was the one who told me this is worse than 97. He says it's not unusual to get that kind of snow up there, but to have the warm temperatures that we had at Lodgepole and Giant Forest in Grant Grove, and then it dumped so much moist precipitation in the form of water on top of feet of snow, that was a terrible combination. And that's why this last double header was not, we didn't suffer nearly much damage in the second round because it came as snow. That snow line was lower, and so we fared a whole lot better.
And I'm gonna, if I could, because I still want to go over some more information before we close things up. We have one more question online.
Yeah, this is kind of a two-part question. First of all, are we planning to use drones to survey damage? And second part of his question is, are we going to make some of this footage available for the public?
Okay, so the first part, while you think about the second part, we do have drones in the park, and we may incorporate the drones parallel to use of the helicopters. So I expect that we'll be using both. We have lined up a contract because the park has a ship dedicated to the park during the main part of the season, but not in the winter. So we've already established that contract, and the earliest we could get the availability of a helicopter is Saturday. So by helicopter and probably drones, both of those will be used. And do we have a good mechanism for sharing video?
A lot of the pictures that you saw here have already been posted on social media and will continue to do so. For video footage, we do have some specifically around South Fork area. If there's interest, I would email us directly to Sequoia_public_affairs@nps.gov. And because their files are so large, we can't just email them out or post them easily on our website. So we have another mechanism to sharing those larger files. So if there's an interest, we may not be able to share everything, but we can, give a sampling of what we have. So that's Sequoia_public_affairs@nps.gov. And with that, was there anything else we wanted to
One last question.
Good.
The trail system, especially in South Fork and probably the High Sierra Trail, Lakes Trail, they're going to become fairly wrecked, but we won't really know for a long time. Any chance to beef up trail crew for the summer?
Well, we were already beefing them up because of the fire.
Yeah.
So now the question is, can we beef them up more? And that gets into twofold. One is funding, and two is, do we have enough people applied? Is that feasible? And so we are working on the funding part, and then that'll feed into whether or not we get enough applicants to make it real or not.
Okay.
Yeah, with that, not the intent to drive anybody to tears or anything, but we already had a hands full this year because we're in year 2 of the fire recovery. And so it's about $50 million of fire recovery projects, of which one of the big things is a really large hazard tree removal program that we're also working on at the same time as trying to address this. So we still got fire recovery, and now we have the storm recovery on top of that. So we're not too bored sitting around the office for sure. So I think what we could do, maybe if you talk about how we want to do the future communications and establish that, is that we'll be here, or a few of us will stick around for any additional questions that you may have. And so some people can head for home a wish, and if you have other questions, I'm around. Okay.
Great. So we talked about the importance of staying informed, and this was just the first phase of us coming to you with what we know now. But we do want to keep that communication open, those channels open. So as always, we direct everyone to our park website. Our team has been very, has been taking all of this information, and our current conditions page is where we update everything as far as road, everything with winter, campgrounds closing, opening, all of that is on our website, and we update that consistently 7 days a week now. Social media, we've been trying to keep everyone informed there with all of those, updates and damage that we're seeing as we're opening and closing to Hospital Rock, with all of that is there. We do send out news releases when we have larger updates and larger closures or larger announcements. And so if you would like to sign up for that, we have a big mailing list, and we can add you to that. There's a sign-up sheet in the back if you're not already on our list. And then more public meetings. If we see the need to, really bring some more information to you all, we're happy to host these public meetings. We like to get together with you all. But also, the discussion, what I wanted to bring to you was whether our local stakeholders preferred. I'm happy to do written updates and send out those updates either on a weekly basis or as we know more, and send them in writing. Or, during the fires, we were having cooperators calls and, allowed our stakeholders to call in on a periodic basis for updates with our superintendent, with Rick, with, anyone that's involved in that. So it's just a preference of, would you prefer to receive an email with written updates, or would you like to call in and have a more interactive conversation with us as we have more information to share? And that's for you, business owners, stakeholders, our community members.
I think from the chamber's perspective, I will reach out to you, and we can do something where we can post on that for local business.
Yeah.
Through social media and email newsletters and whatnot. Again, just representing local businesses. But yeah.
Yeah, my instinct is to want to have those cooperator calls and have those, virtual gatherings. And maybe from that, if you all could join in and then maybe share out to your specific stakeholders and help us share out that information. We have, our website, we have news releases, but it's a lot more efficient, and you all have better relationships with each other on how to share out that information that we're sharing with you all.
Yeah, I think we can, let's plan to set up the virtual on kind of a regular, because then we can also share images and all that stuff that are easier than doing so with a newsletter sort of thing. So we'll try to do all of the above, and when there's major information, we could do it in person. I personally like in-person meetings, and so I'm willing to do them.
So for you all that are here, that sign-up sheet in the back, if you'd like to be included on those calls, and you can maybe write down, do you want news releases, or do you want to be on the calls, or both? You can just put your emails there, and I'll send out the invites to everyone. And we'll work with the chamber to also disperse them that way as well. All right.
So we just recently set up, it's a group of social media, and then just, putting quotes around it, and for those announcements that seem important for the entire community to know. So it would be great if we could somehow collaborate to make that a little bit easier. And at this point, we have just under 100 people who have signed up for it. They all check that they want announcements from about road closures and, of course, the parks and everything. But yeah, I'd like to see if we could somehow make that easier to maintain.
Yeah, I'll give you my card and we can connect. Thank you. All right. Anyone else before we close up this portion of the meeting? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, both virtually and in person. Clay mentioned he and Rick will be around a little bit longer to answer more questions if you have them. But thank you so much, and I will have more information as we know more. Thank you.
Thank you.